Hey there, listeners. Well, great to be back with you after a couple of weeks of taking a break and enjoyed taking a break. One of the most impactful leadership styles that are out there today tends to challenge the traditional top-down approach. And that style is known as servant leadership. The question I've got, and a lot of others have as well, is what is servant leadership? So let's discuss.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
Welcome to the Ask Denis episode. This is a freestyle episode where I'm asked a question by our listeners or I share my thoughts, experiences and insights from working with many leaders around the globe. In today's fast-paced, ever-changing business environment, leadership is often associated with things like authority, strategy, and driving results. However, one of the most impactful leadership styles tends to challenge the traditional top-down approach. And as I said in my introduction, it's called servant leadership. Now, this leadership philosophy, if I can put it that way, starts to prioritize serving others first and then starting to adopt a culture of trust, collaboration, and long-term success. So the question out there is, so what is servant leadership? Servant leadership is a leadership approach where the main goal of the leader is to serve their team rather than putting a whole lot of authority over them. This terminology, servant leadership, is actually coined by a guy called Robert K. Greenleaf. Now, he was an American writer, speaker, and management consultant. And he pioneered this concept or saying of servant leadership in the 1970s. Yeah, we're talking about 50 years ago. But this leadership philosophy is still around today and is probably more of an emphasis today than it has been in the past. It's really about the leader's responsibility to nurture and develop their people, ensuring that these individuals have the tools and support needed to succeed. If you think about the analogy of putting a seed into some dirt, putting some blood and bone, as we call it, putting some fertilizer, some water, sunlight, nurturing it to help that seed become a plant and grow to give out fruit and so forth. Servant leadership is more or less like that as well. But really, what servant leadership is about empowering and uplifting others rather than seeking power of control. It's also about listening and understanding the needs of the team. What are they actually saying and what do they actually need? And it's creating a culture of trust, empathy, and growth. And that trust, that word there, that is a huge word that's in leadership as well. And if you can actually create a culture of trust, it's going to be amazing to see where you and the organization can go. But it's about adopting collaboration rather than competition. Developing future leaders by mentoring and guiding them to their full potential. Now, a servant leader is not a leader that's what I would say being passive, sitting back, not really out there. A servant leader deeply engages, making sure that the team thrives while still driving these results with purpose and vision. But my question again there would be, so how do you implement a servant leadership mindset? Because adopting a servant leadership mindset requires what I would say a deliberate shift from traditional leadership approaches. So here are some key steps to implement this leadership style. Number one is, okay, there's active listening out there, but it's actually prioritizing it. So prioritizing active listening. Because you see, the servant leaders, they take time out to authentically, genuinely listen to team members. Well, what does this mean? It means that they want people to have open dialogue and feedback, seeking to understand challenges before offering up solutions. And they also are valuing diverse perspectives and ideas. Now, this one's a big one. So how do you get people within the team to speak up? You know what? For some people, they might have a team of 10, just using that number as an example. They tend to sometimes go to 3 people and favor those 3. But you know what? The other 7 may have a diverse perspective or even some other ideas. And a smart leader, a servant leader, will actually get them to actually engage as well. Number 2 is empower your team. So instead of micromanaging them, a servant leader gives the people the autonomy, but also the confidence to make decisions and take ownership of their work. So here are some ways to empower your team. Providing necessary resources and training. Encouraging professional and personal growth. And trusting those employees to take initiative and innovate. Once again, there's that word trust, and it's quite key. Number 3 is lead by example. Because you see, the servant leaders, they set the tone for their teams by role modeling behaviors that they wish to see. You can't go out there and say, hey, I want you to do this, and then you go and do something different. See, demonstrating integrity, humility, and accountability. Treating everyone with respect and fairness, but showing a strong commitment to ethical leadership. Number 4 is adopt a culture of growth and development. A servant leader actively invests in the personal and professional growth of their team. And how can they achieve that? Well, by providing mentorship and coaching, recognizing and celebrating individual and the team's achievements, and encouraging ongoing learning and skill development. Number 5 is make decisions for the greater good. So servant leaders, what they tend to do is prioritize the well-being of their people, their customers, and the broader community. Now, what does this mean? Well, actually, it's considering the long-term impact of decisions. It's creating a purpose-driven organization, and it's leading with empathy and compassion. So there's 5 key steps. Number 1, prioritize active listening. Number 2, empower your team. Number 3, lead by example. And number 4, adopt a culture of growth and development. And number 5, make decisions for the greater good. So that's all good. We've talked about that stage, about how do you actually implement a servant leadership mindset. But we've also talked about what servant leadership is. So what's the impact of servant leadership? Well, those organizations that embrace the concept or the philosophy of servant leadership, they tend to often experience higher employee engagement and lower turnover, in other words, attrition. But they also have they see stronger team collaboration. You see, the employees tend to feel valued, heard. In other words, their voice has been heard and motivated to contribute to their best work, which then again drives innovation and success. A servant leader, what they'll tend to do is create a ripple effect. So when leaders serve their teams, those teams are more likely to serve customers, stakeholders in the community in more meaningful ways. So the leadership style develops a culture of excellence, resilience, and ongoing improvement. Servant leadership is not about giving up your authority. It's about using leadership as a tool to empower, uplift, and drive sustainable success. By focusing on serving others first, leaders will build stronger teams. They'll create a thriving workplace, and they'll leave a lasting legacy of impact. In a world where leadership is often measured by power, true leadership is defined by service. My question to you, listeners, as I bring this episode to an end. Are you ready to lead by serving? Hey, your call to action, if you're looking at engaging a coach, a speaker, facilitator, what will be quite cool is if you and I can get on a call. I'm going to give you a free 30-minute strategy call session. And if you go to my website, leadingchangepartners.com, and you'll see some buttons there or some icons that say book a call. Click on that and it'll take you to my booking link. And what it will do is that it will actually book a time that's appropriate for you on a day that's appropriate for you and I, and it will send us both a meeting booking. Number 2 is if you can do me a favor, if you can put a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. This helps the visibility. This actually helps the show raise its profile, raise its visibility with people, so more and more people can start listening to the episodes. Remember that I do this podcast to help develop leaders and executives to embrace excellence, but also their well-being too. Because if leaders are learning and changing and growing, then they're staying relevant. If they don't change and they are not staying relevant, then they're going to run the risk of being left behind. So I'd love to get on a call with you, but also would love your review and rating on Apple and Spotify. So listeners, that's it for this episode. It's always a pleasure being with you. Thanks for joining me on the Leadership is Changing podcast. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.